welcome to the Forward Podcast. This week we have a special episode for you. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, you can already see our surprise this week is that we have a guest with us. So I am here with my husband, better half, as always, Thomas Shepard, and our very first time guest, Andrew Carlson.
Yeah, Andrew, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Oh, man, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So Andrew is a great friend of ours. We have known each other. How long have we known each other now?
I would say going on 3 years.
Wow, 3 years already.
Time
That's
flies.
unreal. It
Time
does.
flies.
So Carrie and I actually are sharing a mic. So let me just put that out there real quick. We'll try to go back and forth without moving it too much. But Andrew, the Carlsons and I met about 3 years ago. He is a teacher at our school and just an incredible blessing for all those who tune in and are on in ministry. You realize the importance of having a family that are just faithful. They're there. They love the Lord. And this is one of those couples. To us, they're just great friends. But more than that, we're co-laborers for the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, Andrew, to start us out, kind of tell us a little bit about your family.
My wife is Bethany. We've been married going on 6 years this coming summer. We have 2 little boys. Graham is going on 3. Lincoln is going on 1. He'll celebrate his first birthday on the Super Bowl. So he was a Super Bowl baby last year.
That's right.
That's so
Patrick
crazy.
Mahomes got his Super Bowl, and we got our second son. That was cool.
That was a crazy story, too.
It's an awesome
Very,
story.
yeah.
Fast, but that was a fast night, and so that was cool. Bethany is an educator as well. She is a PE teacher, health teacher, very good coach, and we both kind of met because of education and serving the Lord, and God brought us together later in our lives. We had kids, I guess, later in our lives, but it's been a great journey so far, and we really trust the Lord every step of the way, and it's been a great time serving the Lord so far.
That's so awesome. Well, we love having you on staff there at the school and at the church. You're a great blessing. But just kind of for our listeners, where we're going this evening is about a week ago or so, something happened to my body. In fact, I'm still scratchy on my voice, but I felt fine. And I remember telling Carrie, I'm not running a fever, I'm not sick, but I did begin to lose my voice. And so with that, kind of last minute, I called Brother Carlson. I said, look, Andrew, like I'm struggling. My voice is going, and would you be able to teach? And so Andrew's like, yeah, absolutely. And that Sunday, I preached both services, but Andrew took my life stage group, and he has done this before. He did an entire series for, 8 months or so, and just a very, very gifted speaker. So with that, he got up, and he was going in one direction. You can kind of tell that story, what the Lord did, but I say all that to say, Andrew taught a lesson that Carrie and I both walked away just talking about, man, we needed that. And so the more we talked about the subject, the more we talked to each other about just how much it helped us. Finally, we got to have Andrew on. We got to talk through some of these points because we know a lot of our viewers, some of you have made it known you're not Christian, and we understand that. You don't believe in God, and we understand that. But for those of us who are Christians, this subject means so much to us. Yeah. And it's something that I believe no matter what stage you're in, we all go through. Yeah. And so, Andrew, kind of tell us a little bit about how that journey started of you teaching this kind of last minute. You told me that you kind of changed your mind. And so kind of explain the hows and the whys behind this subject.
Yeah, well, teaching Bible on a daily basis, there's always things going through my mind about, how I could use this in different fashions, in different ways. So going into the weekend, I was assuming that I would probably teach something that I loved from Bible class. But I sat down and I began to look at what I was thinking, and God just switched it up. It was just like, that's not good enough. So I went back to something that I was just studying in my own personal life, and that was the coming of David into his reign as king of Israel. And I was talking with my dad about this yesterday, and he reminded me, he said he thinks he got it from Pastor Shetler, a good friend of his, which you guys know who that is. Oh, yeah. he said, Andrew, the messages that have the most impact are the ones that come from the heart. He said, Pastor Shetler said, a message that comes from the mind will reach the intellect. A message that comes from the heart or the emotions will reach the emotions, and the message that comes from the heart will reach the heart. And so you guys talk about how, that hit you, but really this was a message that, based on our conversations, even last week, this was something that God put, because I think Bethany and I needed it probably just as much as you guys in your own way. So, I started going through 2 Samuel at the beginning of the year, and God just showed me these thoughts. So when you feel like God has forgotten about you.
So that's our subject, is when you feel like God has forgotten you. And for anyone who goes through life, again, no matter what stage, I feel like all three of us could say at some point we've been there, whether little or big. Man, God, where are you? What is... I'm going through this, and I feel like maybe you're not there, and or you don't care. And I think sometimes somebody listening to this will say, man, that's so blasphemous. But it's not a proverbial fist in the air where you're so angry. It's just lonely moments.
Yeah.
From your perspective, Kara, especially as a mom or a wife, let's just stick with the mom. Maybe not the wife. You never thought about that.
No, we'll do the whole thing.
You think women go through kind of those stages as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I was going to say, too, it was really fascinating last week how many people came up to me and said, "Wow, that was for me." And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was for me. And how many of us in that class, you could just tell it was a God moment.
Yeah.
It was, and sometimes like God has to do crazy things, like take the pastor's voice because he's moved in someone else's heart, and let everyone kind of have their moment to follow his will. But it was cool. It was neat how that class really just resonated with that thought last week.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a thought that people won't admit that they think.
Yeah.
And for sure, that's how it hit me. I was like, wow, I don't ever remember admitting that I thought this, but I definitely have thought this before. This is definitely a moment that I've had. And so I think that really reached all of us on a very basic human level of, we've all felt like as moms, God's forgotten about me. I'm just stuck here doing the same old thing over and over. Or you don't even have to be a mom. Just as a woman sometimes, married, unmarried, whatever. Like, did God forget I was here? Like, did he leave the room and forget to ask me to come along? I think we've all been there. We've all felt that. But I love how you just brought it. It was so real. It was just raw.
Yeah.
Just being able to admit that.
Yeah. So, Andrew, let's go into kind of our first point here. Obviously, the subject, you used a character in the Bible, you used David in a big way.
Yeah.
So kind of just present that fact, just kind of where you went, the direction, then let's dive into a couple of those points and kind of dissect them as well.
Yeah. So as I read through 2 Samuel, I began to think to myself, okay, David was a teenager when Samuel anointed him to be king, and yet he went through so much, and much of that is very well known about Saul's crazy pursuit of him, and this is his father-in-law too, right? So he goes through this crazy pursuit, and yet David maintains his maturity. He maintains really a respect for God in not being willing to have any kind of actual animosity towards towards Saul, or really any he's not even going to give credence to a statement that somebody makes about how Saul should not be where he's at, you should be where he's at. And so really the first thing that I noticed from my study was that when you feel like God forgets you, you have to start from the place that this is all about God in the beginning. Like everything is always about God. David learned that so profoundly. And one of the things that I have told my classes lately is look at the amount of time that man has spent on the earth. If you're an evolutionist, you say that we've been here for millions of years. If you're a creationist, we say that we've been here for 6,000 years. And yet the longest living man has only lived 100 of those years. Excuse me, 900 years. And my life, if it goes to term, will be 85, 90 years. That's an illustration of life is not about you. There's so much time, and I feel a small percentage of that. But David really, I mean, Saul killed himself, and a man came to David, telling David that I killed Saul. He actually he lied about this story. You know, Saul asked me to kill him, and I killed him, and I came to give you his crown, and came to give you the kingdom. And David ended up executing him, and he mourned for Saul.
Yeah.
This is a man who has thrown spears at him. This is a man who has given his daughter. David was Saul's son-in-law, and he took Michal and gave him to another man. This is a man that has hunted David like no one else has hunted another person before. And David mourned the death of Saul. And so it's an illustration of the fact that David kind of understood, life is not about me, and the way that I fit into God's economy is as a servant. I'm a servant of his. I do what he wants, and God can use me any way he wants to. So that was pretty powerful right out of the gate.
I love that thought. When you feel like God's forgotten you, you have to remember everything's not about us. Everything is about God.
Yeah.
But Kara, wouldn't you agree that that is actually really hard to live out in your day-to-day life?
Oh man, I'm just sitting here like, what person goes through all that and then mourns? Like, I'm cheering. I'm like, thank the Lord he's gone. Like that, who does that?
Yeah.
That was just such a different mindset than what we're accustomed to.
Yeah.
That mourning of your enemy, but because he was God's anointed, like that is nothing that we've ever seen in our culture.
Yeah.
Don't you think, Andrew, that it is easy, if we're not careful, to live in the mindset that it is all about us?
Yeah.
I mean, from you're a dad, you're a husband, you're a teacher, you're a mentor, you're a discipler, you're a Christian, you're all of these things, and yet, isn't it funny how we still take life and we make it all about us?
Yeah, we live in a culture that's like, go out and get yours, like take what is rightfully yours.
Right.
I didn't work long in corporate America, but like I remember very vividly a sales job at a bank. And it was like, man, if you're going to be successful in this industry, you got to go and you got to take what's yours. And that's not the way that David lived.
Right.
I didn't even add this when I was talking about this, but this is not an isolated situation or mentality that David had. Abner was Saul's captain of the guard, and Abner set up Saul's other son, one of his other sons, Ishbosheth, to be king right after Saul died.
Right.
And when Abner was killed, David mourned his death. This is a man that should have then, ushered the kingdom into David's hand. And beyond that, there's actually three powerful illustrations of David's understanding of the fact that this is about God. Ishbosheth himself. David mourned Saul's death, Abner's death, and Ishbosheth's death.
Wow.
And it just illustrates, like I said, that David realized, I'm supposed to be king, but God will do this in his time because it's his game.
Yeah. So I think for our listeners, it's so vital that all of us remember in life, when you're down, when you're discouraged and or even depressed, one of the best things you could do very quickly is just remember, hey, life is not just about me. Get out, serve, help someone else. Like David, like Gary said it would be easy just to laugh like, oh yeah, you thought you had me, but you didn't. And I think even in our flesh, there would have been that like kind of ha-ha moment. And yet David, who had a heart after God, truly had a sense that, you know what, this is not all about me.
Yeah.
This is all about my Savior. This is all about my God. I love that thought.
And I think Andrew said it in the beginning right off. It's respect for God. Like David wasn't, he respected these men, but it wasn't for them.
Right.
It was for God. Like that is just incredible. It's an awesome character trait to see lived out in this story, that he literally followed God through some of the worst things someone can go through, and had that patience. And it really is the description of meekness, that power under control.
Yeah.
David had the power to do anything he wanted to do. He's killed lions, he's killed bears, he's killed giants. He can do anything he wants to do. He wasn't a pushover. He wasn't some young kid just afraid to upset mighty warriors. David was the mighty warrior.
Yeah.
and he could do anything he wanted to do.
Mhm.
And he chose to spend that power on patience.
Yeah.
And what an example.
It's awesome.
Incredible.
It's awesome. Andrew, go into our second point. What's next here?
Yeah, okay. The next one would be to review and do your last instructions. And I was even going to say, I really believe that every step subsequent to remember that this is all about God, it's all going to be pointless if you don't start with that, remember that it's all about God. In a moment where you choose to say, okay, this is not what I expected, I'm going to remember that this is about God and not me. God is not using us like cannon fodder. We're not target practice that God can just, we're not consumable, that God's just going to be like, okay, I'm going to use you because I want to glorify myself and then I'm done with you. That's absolutely not God. I mean, that goes against the character trait that God is love.
Yeah.
So he's certainly not doing that. But you do have so much release and so much decompressing of stress when you begin with that fact that it's all about God, and then you can go on to this next thing that God showed me. He showed me the next part would be to review and do your last instructions. And I pulled this out of 2 Samuel chapter 2 verse 1. As you go through 2 Samuel chapter 1, you will see the mourning of Saul's death, and then later on in the chapter you'll see how he mourns Abner's death and Ishbosheth's death. But 2 Samuel chapter 2 verse 1 is a verse that says, when he got done mourning Saul, he immediately goes to God and he's like, okay, what do I do? Do I go up into the cities of Israel? And God, it's kind of funny. God answers him. He says, yep, go up. And that's all God says. And then David has to say, all right, so where do I go?
Yeah. A little more.
Where is that?
Yeah.
I love it.
But God answers him and he says, go to Hebron. And I can, in my human self, I can only imagine that David's like, okay, so Hebron is where the kingdom's coming to me. Hebron is where I'm going to get it all. And he goes to Hebron, and it's not long before he finds out that Abner has taken the military. I mean, Abner's in charge of the military, so and he's been serving Saul for a long time. Abner has taken Ishbosheth, and he's made him king over all of Israel. And the people are seemingly going along with this. So what I'm saying about this is we need to review and do what our last instruction was. And what David does here is he goes and he gets clear instruction. Yeah. He goes and he finds out exactly what am I supposed to do. And I can't help but thinking that he could be reflecting back to the fact that Saul was taken out of being king because he did not go to utterly destroy the Amalekites. And leading into this section right here, David had just come back from destroying the Amalekites. I find it very, very interesting that, and Jonathan and David being so good of friends, he had to have talked to Jonathan about, like, why am I king? Why am I going to be king? Why would you not be king in Israel? And I have to imagine that Jonathan tells David, my dad did not utterly destroy the Amalekites. My dad offered sacrifices when he wasn't supposed to. And so I believe that David knew very profoundly, you go get clear instruction and you follow that until you get new instructions.
Wow, that's
I
good.
love that.
Yeah.
On the application side, I feel like for us just living this life, it's 2025 at the time this will come out, how important it is for us to do the same thing, to remember we are called to be moms, dads, husbands, wives. Again, the Great Commission for us as Christians is to go out and to win the world for the Lord Jesus Christ. Yeah. I think sometimes we have to be reminded, we get so inward facing, like you talked about in the first point. Now, we've got to get back to what has God commissioned us to do. And when you start thinking about it, here's the cool thing. God never leaves you. It's not like, hey, I'm going to task you with this, now I'll leave. Right. Told David, go, and he was with David the entire time. Yeah. For you as a female, do you not feel like sometimes, hey, you are alone in this? Because y'all go through, especially for women, okay, we can ask your wife too. I'm sure she's been there where okay, you're going to have kids,
Mhm.
and then God didn't commission you and then just leave you.
Mhm.
He's there with you the whole way,
Yeah.
but you have to be reminded, what's the end game bringing these
Yeah.
kids up? What's the end game of working or winning?
Yeah, just one day at a time, one day at a time. We don't like that. As Americans, we like a plan. We like checklists. We like planning for the future. That's an awesome thing about our country and about patriotism. Americans build things. We are builders. We are accomplishers.
Yeah, sure.
We love that. You know, the hustle culture for moms right now, the grind, like slay all day, boss babe. You know, all the slogans. That's a big thing in the feminist movement right now. It's like that culture of, you know, hit it hard and reach your goals. And like you were saying earlier, and those aren't bad things, but they can be in a spiritual sense, you know, because God says, take the next step. And we're like, well, where's the plan? Where's the map? You know, where's the step-by-step directions? And we don't get that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, here's the Bible, read that and figure it out, you know? And sometimes that's how you feel.
Right.
Especially as a woman. You do feel like, okay, well, there's not some big glorious plan in raising babies every day,
Yeah.
you know, and God just says, just do the next day.
Yeah. Well, when you are living your life for somebody else's benefit, and in this case, God's, you are not going to have this massive list of self accomplishments.
Right.
Yes, you will, because God is going to, you know, do great things through you. So your list is going to grow, but then again, you're never going to be able to turn that list around and be like, look what I've accomplished.
Right.
But I mean, you are not like our world is very much like, here's my resume. This is why I'm qualified for, you know, whatever you need, that aspect of. So like build yourself and, you know, accomplish all these things on your own.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Andrew, go into our next point. Keep
Okay.
teaching us.
Okay. All right. So chronologically, as you go through 2 Samuel and you get to the next couple verses, the next thing that God showed me from David's life was to remember others. David is, you know, here Ishbosheth is being set up as king, and David is in Hebron, and Hebron brings him to be their king, and so that's phenomenal. But David, on the heels of Saul's death and then being anointed as king, or being brought to the place where he's going to be made king, he finds the men of Jabesh Gilead who had gone to get Saul's body and Jonathan's body, and they honored his body. They gave him an honorable death. And David says to the men of Jabesh Gilead, I'm going to honor you. I'm not yet king, but I'm going to honor you. And he kind of implies, I will be king someday, and I will not forget the kindness that you showed to Saul and his family. It's kind of like this window into David's attitude at this point, because he knows that God is going to fulfill his promise. And that's the whole crux of the whole waiting. Yeah. You have this confidence in the fact that God's going to fulfill his promise. So David is looking for other people. He's looking for people that he can be a help to, that he can be a servant to. And that's exactly who David has been all of his life. He's been a servant to his dad, taking care of sheep. He's been a servant to King Saul. He's been a servant to God ultimately when he goes to Saul and he says, hey, why is this man cursing God and his army? I don't care if I die. I'm going to go throw a stone at him. And if I die, I die, but I think I can kill him. And it's his attitude his entire life. It's really instructive, and I mean, wow, the attitude that David has is so exemplary, and you know, it taught me a lot about what my focus should be in the times where I'm like, okay, God, you led me, I knew you brought me here. Like, why does it feel like it's so hard to go on? Why does it feel like, you know, think we're at a dead end?
Do you feel like, Andrew, there's ever been a time in your life personally where you have struggled with just this, kind of made big decisions, big moves? You know, you've got a wife, kids, two incredible sons. But have you ever felt that way? And let me ask you, Have you ever gone through a moment where you began to help someone else or remembering someone else and it kind of brought you out of that discouragement or that moment?
Yeah. Do we have time for two illustrations
Go
that
for
are
it. Yeah,
pretty powerful?
absolutely.
So the first one happened when I checked with my parents. When I taught this in Sunday school, I said 7th and 8th grade because I didn't know it was 7th grade. It was after 7th grade.
Cool.
So my parents have experience as camp directors. When I was a kid, they were camp directors in Colorado and loved it. It's the best. I mean, I have the greatest memories from being a kid in the mountains of Colorado. So when I was in 7th grade, we had just moved to Pensacola. My dad began teaching for Pensacola Christian College. And in the summertime, my parents did not want to, my dad didn't want to do the teacher thing, just, take time off and not do anything. And so they looked for a place that they could serve the Lord in ministry. The year before, so after my 6th grade year, my older brother Stephen and I had gone to the Bill Rice Ranch in Tennessee, and we had gone to camp with our youth group. We loved it. It was a great time. Great for us at that stage of our life. And my parents heard about a Western division of the Bill Rice Ranch, and they were like, that's cool. Let's investigate that a little bit. So Flagstaff, Arizona, West Branch exists, and my dad calls the director. Ironically, his last name is Carlson, Troy Carlson.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, weird irony, no relation, but Troy Carlson is asking my dad on the phone, what experience do you have? My dad was like, well, my wife and I have been a camp director. My wife is a registered nurse. She can function as your nurse. She'll get the certification for Arizona, that kind of stuff. And he said, I was program director. So Troy is like, okay, come on, that's perfect. Let's do this. And he says, do you have any help? Do you have any kids? And my dad said, yeah, my oldest son is a freshman. We literally just moved from Wisconsin 2 years ago, where our family raised some horses. So they're very comfortable with horses. He knows exactly what he's doing. And of course, Steven today, he's very, this is my responsibility. I'm going to do this. That's how he always has
just
been.
a little bit.
Yeah. So Troy Carlson was like, perfect. He can be our head cowboy. We have a rodeo at the end of the week, and he can run the horses. He's in charge of the horses all week, and then the rodeo at the end of the week. And Troy goes, do you have any other kids? And Dad's walking through the list, and he's like, yes, I have a 7th grade son. And Troy's like, perfect. That's the age of all the kids that come and work in our dish room.
I feel like you are David in the story because you're like the last one out with the sheep.
Jesse, do you have any more sons?
Yeah, he's not important.
You don't want him.
So I spent the summer washing dishes, and no criticism on the Bill Rice Ranch or West Branch, but I needed to work in a polo shirt, and so those were my school shirts.
My.
So I'm 7th grade in a commercial dish room, and running those big dishwashers, and you get nasty soaked, and it's camp. Kids are bringing they eat way too much food and hardly eat any. Take way more than they need. So I'm destroying my nice polo shirts for school. And I went to the rodeo one Friday afternoon deep in the summer, and I was like, you know what? My brother and I raised these horses together back in Wisconsin. I know just as much about horses as he does. So there were 2 horses. He got on one, which was the program. That's what you do. And I got on the other. We're riding them around the corral, and they do this game called the Bucket Brigade. Pretty common. You dunk a bucket into water, and you have 3 different stages. You got to run it to a bigger bucket that's on a teeter-totter, and you throw the water that you're carrying between the 3 of your teammates into this bucket, and as soon as you get enough water in the bucket, the teeter-totter tips and pops a balloon. Well, I'm helping because I saw this the year before at camp when I was a kid. I've seen this all throughout the summer. I go to the teeter-totter where the balloon and water is, and I'm stabilizing the water and trying to make sure that everything gets in there. I knock the thing, and I accidentally pop the balloon. So the team that shouldn't have won is cheering because I accidentally popped the balloon.
Oh.
So Troy Carlson, and I have a good relationship to this day with him, so this is not a slam on him. But he covers the announcer's microphone that he's calling the rodeo from up on this big platform, and he covers the microphone, and he goes, Andrew, you need to go back to the kitchen.
Oh, it's so sad.
So I knew not to be a brat. I would have gotten in trouble if I like said no
Sure.
or, made a big scene about leaving. I left and I was like, why am I here? What in the world am I doing? So in that moment, I absolutely felt like, is this about all my parents? Am I just the cannon fodder? Am I just the target practice? Am I just the side, not even the side show to the main show? I didn't tell you guys this when we were in Sunday school, but God brought it back to my mind later. He completely brought that full circle because literally 10 years, I'm sorry, it was a little bit more than 10 years to the day, not to the day, to the summer. Troy Carlson called me. I was living in Colorado at the time, and he called me in like March or February of the year leading into the summer, and he said, I need a program director. I was working at Wells Fargo, the bank, and I wanted to get into ministry, and I was asking God for an opportunity to work in ministry that summer. I was my dad that next summer in 2015.
My word.
It was
That is
incredible.
amazing.
I forgot that when I was teaching the Sunday school lesson, but when I walked away, I was like, I can't believe that God, like I washed dishes. And then 10 years later, I was the program director. It just illustrates that you remember that it's all about the Lord. You find out what your instructions are, and you just stay with them, and you serve. You just serve, and you serve, and you serve. You don't serve with an attitude of like, this is pointless, this is going nowhere. You serve knowing that God does not return void. His instructions are not empty. They're not purposeless. They're not pointless. You go on and you serve God knowing that he's going to come through on what he called you to do.
I love
That's
that.
amazing. And it's such a cool thing to think, like, would you have been in a place of humility enough to be asked to do that had you not been the dishwasher? Like, it's cool. Like, God gave you the training that you needed in that moment to do something great 10 years later. That's such a cool, and I mean, maybe you would have. Maybe that training was for something else, but it's just neat to like relate those things closely. Like, God put you there, like, okay, you're going to have the humility, you're going to have the understanding of what it's like to be the small guy, and then he put you right back where you knew you should have been.
Should have kicked Steven out, kicked him off his horse.
No, not at all. Nope, because the process is important.
That's right.
I mean, it's a joke, I know, but the process is important. God doesn't elevate people who elevate themselves.
That's great.
So,
and I love that even though you were younger then, that whole scenario has taught you all the way through life. We all go through this. In ministry, Carrie and I have been there so many times where you're pouring into other people and you think, does anybody care about me? Does anybody care about my ministry or our family? And God taught you at a young age, just remember, son, just keep it about others. Use the word, servanthood. We are servant leaders. We are truly called to serve others. And for anybody listening to this, you do realize that's not always easy. I mean, there are those moments where we are looking in the mirror. Does anybody remember this guy? Does anybody remember this girl? Like, hey, I'm still here, guys.
Absolutely.
And I love that God taught you that. And then the cool story is that full circle, here you are serving, and God said, just wait your time. Just wait your turn.
Absolutely.
It's so good. Hey, what about another one?
Okay. So remember that this is all about the Lord. Review and do your last instructions. Remember others. Find others that you can be a blessing to. This next one, number 4, is really, really important. I just simply stated it by saying, ignore the snake, capital S, snake. There had to be times, and if you look at verses 8 through 10 of 2 Samuel chapter 2, this is the moment when Abner takes Ishbosheth in Israel and he makes him king of all of Israel. And, David has already gone to Hebron. And, like I said, I would imagine in his mind, okay, this is where I get the kingdom. This is where everything that I have struggled and waited for and been through now falls in my hands. And Abner, who had the military and had the ability to back this up, takes Ishbosheth, who's older than David, I think about 10 years older than David, and makes Ishbosheth king. And I was thinking to myself, if I'm David, I'm thinking, have I not been through enough?
Yeah.
Have I not done enough? And these are the questions that God gave me when I was writing this lesson. Yeah, I imagine that Satan would come to David and plant these thoughts in his head, like, haven't you been through enough, David? Or hasn't it been long enough? I mean, you were anointed as a teenager, and now you're pushing 30, if not 30 already. And then the biggest one that really is a dangerous philosophy to live by is, don't you deserve this? I mean, I can hear these questions going off in David's mind. Haven't you been through enough? Hasn't it been long enough? Are you sure that God actually, still intends to use you? And don't you deserve this with all that you've been through? You have killed a giant for his benefit, Saul's benefit. You have um, you have been thrown spears at. You have been chased like you're an animal. You have waited patiently. You have honored the man who hunted you. Have you not been through it? Don't you deserve to go and say a speech at least and call your favors in, I guess, if you're David. But David doesn't do that. Satan is a master of creating doubt. That's what he did in the garden with Eve. He did not come to Eve and say, God is wrong. He just made her start questioning, and he let the human mind take over and succumb to the temptation. So you got to ignore the snake. You've got to ignore the thoughts that come. And that's why it's so important to review and do your last instructions. You have to have clear instructions.
Yeah.
When David says, shall I go to Hebron? And he watches Abner anoint Ishbosheth king, David, because he has sought God's clear instruction and got clear instructions, yes, go up, yes, go to Hebron. David can be like, okay, it's not about me. I know I'm supposed to be in Hebron. And when the doubts come, having clear instructions means that you have so much more power to ignore the snake. One of the phrases that I hear a lot in secular culture is we want to empower, and that's a big buzzword. That's a big catchphrase in education. If we as educators are not empowering kids, then we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. Okay, sometimes empowering people means that you empower yourself, but not in the self-building, self-help way. David empowered himself by getting clear instructions, and a person who is serious about following God will passionately seek instruction. God gave me these things that relate to instruction. Clear instruction comes from intentional, consistent pursuit. And I've seen that in my life. I'm sure you guys would say the same thing.
Yes.
You do not have a question in your mind about what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to be when you get clear instructions from God. Indecisiveness comes all the time when a couple things happen. Here's a couple causes for indecisiveness. If you live by the song "I Did It My Way," you're pretty good if you don't ever question what you did, because that's impressive. But I can't imagine that somebody who always does it their way is never gonna look back and be like, man, there was no mistakes in that. You're gonna come to some point in your life, if you are half human, where you say, yeah, I did it my way, and that was the dumb way. So if you have no pursuit, if there is no pursuit of clear instructions from God, you're just I did it my way and solo mio. Then you're going to get to the place where it's like, wow, that was the wrong direction. You're indecisive in the second place because you casually pursue. Like I've been in the place before where I have made a decision and I'm like, hey, God, what do you think I should do? Thanks, appreciate it. I got this from here. It's just like this casual. I'm going to read my Bible a couple times. I'm going to ask God a couple times about this, but there's no like seriousness. The times in my life where I have literally gotten down on my knees consistently and prayed and seen God do something, I can go back and I can say, I have no doubt about this. And not to belabor the point, but I told you at the beginning of the session that we got married later in life, and I know that my wife is God's girl for me because he held her away from me for so long, probably because I had lessons to learn. I asked him for 10 solid months for my wife, and I know that she is God's answer for me. That makes it better in temptation when God is when Satan comes to you and you're like, he's like, you'd be happier with so and so. It's like, you know what? I know that God's answer for me is Bethany. And so clear instructions. You got to ignore the snake. You can't let doubt come in.
Yeah.
I love that. There's so many times in life, Andrew, that we all really do at least lean into the snake. We might not listen, but we definitely allow circumstances and people to lean into our life too much to where we do start to see that doubt sneak in.
Yeah.
We do allow, I mean, those questions could have been there in his mind, and
Yeah.
for us is the same. Am I supposed to be doing this? And should I be going down this road? Should we be buying this? And for those who are young, should I marry this person? Oftentimes we trip our own selves up by listening to the negativity that is in this world. I would say even in the family lifestyle as well, that definitely comes in.
Yeah, and doubt doesn't need very much, just a little foothold, just a little bit of, that those moments where you indulge it, because all of us have doubts in our mind, but how far do we let that go? A lot of that's just humanity. Of course, I second guess myself a lot. Like, I'll trust anybody else, but myself, I'm like, wait, no, but just to have that foothold where instead of just having the thought and then immediately, redirecting that towards God's promises and God's, omnipotence in our lives, we indulge that. And we say, like, maybe, what if, I bet, and then it's that foothold of that wraps around you and then you're caught. Just like Eve, that's such a great example. I mean, it wasn't that much. It didn't take much, it was just that moment where she thought, I think I believe this a little bit more than I believe God.
Yeah,
And how quickly that process can happen.
That's so dangerous.
Yeah.
It is. Well, listen, we got to start wrapping this up. But any last thoughts, Andrew, you want to leave with us in this story?
Yeah, I would say, ignore the crowds too. There, you can find people in your life. I mean, that would be another one of the things to do when you feel God is forgotten. You can find anybody to tell you anything you want to hear, and
that's true.
And this absolutely, you can even find good advisors to tell you the thing that you want to hear.
Yeah, my wife is that for me. Tell me what I want to hear.
Yeah.
My parents got to the place where they said, Andrew, we're not going to tell you what we think, and we're not going to give you any more advice because you got to stop getting your advice. You'll just do what we say. And you're not our responsibility. You don't do what we say. So I had to learn, do not listen to the crowds. David could have listened to the crowds. Ishbosheth feared assassination. He was assassinated. David had mighty men. The mighty men in Israel don't follow you unless you're impressive. He was a national hero as a teenager. He could have had people, tell him, go be king. We'll support you. Go take this. So ignore the crowds. And there's some really powerful verses in Psalms that I shared in Sunday school class that I couldn't help but thinking David was thinking about these when he wrote these Psalms or these circumstances. Ignore the crowds would be the fifth thing, and then number 6 and number 7 are wait, and trust. If you want to look these up later, I'll shout out these references, and then I don't know how we give them later, but Psalm 27:14, Psalm 37:9, and Psalm 37:34 will shock you when you read those Psalms and those in particular verses about what they say and how they might be connected to this story. It's incredible how David just learned to wait, and then he trusted. He was the father of the man who wrote, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding." How many times, like, how did Solomon know? Obviously, the Holy Spirit led him, but God uses people. And Solomon was the wisest man in the world. And he wrote these words, "Lean not unto your own understanding." There had to be days where David talked about who Solomon's mother was. "I leaned to my own understanding. I thought I could sit these battles out. And I walked on my palace and I saw your mom." And it was the beginning of one of the worst periods of my life. And so lean not unto thine own understanding. And then you preached a message really recently of Psalm 118, 8 and 9, where the Psalm says it's better to put your confidence in the Lord than in men, or in the next verses, than in princes. I think David really understood in the times where you feel like God forgets you, you need to wait on the Lord. You need to trust in the Lord, and you need to hope in the Lord. Hope in the fact that he's not going to give you an instruction that is empty, that's pointless, that he forgets about. He never forgets, and he'll always come through with you.
I love it. I love it. Well, I hope this has been a blessing to everyone listening this week. I think the thought we want to leave with everyone that Brother Andrew brought out so clearly is that God never will leave us.
Yeah.
He never will forsake us. He will never forget us. He is always there for us. But there are those moments of weakness. There are those moments that, Gary, we've been in ministry for 19 years, and yet we still have those moments where it's like, what is going on and what's God doing? And I think these points resonate with anyone who is going through life, and especially if you're driven. We're driven to this place where we do begin to look and question and ask, and I think this is a great reminder through the life of David that God is always going to be there with us. Carrie, any last thoughts?
Just a great lesson to remember. Like you just said, babe, don't give up. Don't quit. Keep on going. I wonder what I've heard it before, but I can't remember the year span from when David was told he would be king to when he actually became king. It was probably 15 years?
Yeah.
Something around there. So if you're under 15 years, there's still hope. If God's plan for you is not yet 15 years old. But don't give up. It's a beautiful thing. I love that verse that says he makes everything beautiful in his time.
Yeah.
And that's just, there's so much hope there. We don't know his timing.
Yeah.
We don't know his whole plan, but hang in there, stay faithful, do the next right thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Andrew, thanks for being on our show.
Man, thank you
this
so
is
much.
great.
This was
great.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's been a huge help. I think the Lord gave you this lesson at a perfect time when we've probably got about 45 in that life stage group, and people have talked about it. I mean, I've been so jealous. I'm like,
Well, I mean, like I said, I think God's doing some stuff in Bethany's in my life right now. We have some, things that we're waiting on the Lord with, and they're not light things. So all that to say, I think, sometimes God teaches you lessons pretty interesting ways, and I wonder if maybe he put this in my mind for my benefit. You guys say for your benefit, but all the glory to God, because he knows how to teach us and he knows how to communicate to us. So thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Been a blast. Well, listen, continue to tune in. We appreciate all the 5-star reviews, and even this week when you get this, make sure you share it and let somebody know that we're thinking about them. You can always write to us at the forwardpodcast@outlook.com. Carrie and I both are on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook as well. So reach out if you have any questions. We trust that you'll have a wonderful week.